Number 3, yeah, completely different. Now, before I fully introduce Emma, I just want to say that the first time I saw Emma perform was at Reghead, up in Penrith. She came on in what was quite a sort of pedestrian meeting, and she blew the crowd away. I just thought, oh my God, this woman's astonishing. Why didn't I know about her? Anyway, so I just felt I had to say that, Emma. Very good. So, without any further ado, Emma McGordon, who is a fantastic writer, performer, poet from West Cumbria, with the most amazing accent. I love hearing her speak, and I think I want to hear more Cumbrian accents in the county. So if you have one, don't get rid of it. It's important. Be proud of who you are and where you're from. And I'm going to hand you over now to Emma McGordon. Thank you.
Hello. Hiya. I have got a Cumbrian accent. That's part of my USP, I think. When I tell people I'm from Cumbria, people from outside the county, I think they think of Windermere, they think of Coniston, and that's not my Cumbria. My Cumbria is Whitehaven, is Egremont, Cleatormoor, Sept, Mooradour, Workington, Maryport, and the posh bit, which is Cockermouth. That's where it is, that's where. So, I'm going to be honest, right? I can't sit down and present because I walk around a lot, right? I was finding it hard sitting there, if I'm honest. I'm going to be honest and say I wasn't going to apply for Catalyst because I've struggled with Cumbria a lot for all sorts of different reasons. And a friend of mine actually persuaded me and said, just put in for it and see what happens. So I put in, I got it, and then there was a Facebook page, some of you might remember this. There's a Facebook page where the winners were announced. And so one of the comments on the Facebook page, so there's my face there, like, smiling with my little jacket and my little cap on. And this fella said, so what, is she a poet, like? What does she need 25 grand for? She only needs a bit of pen and paper. I'll give her one of them. They want to spend that 25 grand on potholes, never mind this poetry stuff. So this is what I was up against to start with. And I knew, because this is the environment I'd grown up in. And West Cumbria was not an easy place to grow up in for many, many reasons. And especially for someone like myself, who is, I talk about this a lot in my piece, I was othered a lot. I didn't fit in with what West Cumbria considered to be a normal passage through life, and still don't. So I had this piece of writing that I'd been working on for a long time. I couldn't figure out what it is. It's not a poem, but it's full of poetry. It's not a script, but it's set out like a script. It's now got bits of stage direction and all sorts in it. It's a meditation, it's a reflection, it's a long piece of work that I kept adding to and leaving. So I put this in as a proposal to Catalyst. I said, well, what if I put it on film? What would that be like? Like, would I challenge myself to do that? And so I know nothing about film. That was the interesting thing. I was like, I wonder what would happen. So what that meant was I had to use my commission money to bring people in. So like Jack, it was like, you know, it sounded like this big amount of money, and then suddenly you were like, bloody hell, I've chose film, it's an expensive bloody thing to do, isn't it? What have I done here? And that was difficult as well, because I needed 3 things really, and it turned out to be like one of them triangles where I kept getting 2 and I could never get the third. So what I really wanted, I wanted that Cumbrian accent, right? That was hard to find, because I needed them to be good actors. And I also needed them to understand the queer experience. When I talk about the queer experience, I'm not just talking about sexuality, I'm talking about presenting the world in a way that other people don't agree with. Whether that's the way you dress, the way you talk, the way you walk, they're all things that throughout my life I've been told, you're doing that wrong. So I could get 3, I could get brilliant actors with a Cumbrian accent, but they were dead straight, and I was trying to explain things, and I was like, no, not like that. Or I could get people who understood that experience, brilliant actors, they were dead posh. And I was like, it's never going to work. It's never going to. So I kept getting these three things. And then eventually I did find some people to work with, but I brought people into the county. I worked with some people who were based here. And the challenges for me were, I had this complicated story that I was telling that does have a queer narrative at its centre, but it's massively about the landscape. It's massively about the relationship to the landscape in terms of the patriarchal narrative that exists in West Cumbria, in terms of the misogynistic narrative that's there. And someone told me, someone who was writing for Lancaster University wrote this piece where they talks about the paternalistic attitude in West Cumbria, which I'd never considered. And that was a massive eye-opener. I was like, yeah, people wait. Like we talked about, we need to make opportunities in Cumbria. People need permission in West Cumbria, and I don't know why that is. And I'm guilty of that as well. Unless someone gives me, oh, here's catalyst money, I think, all right, I've got the permission, I've got the validation to go and do something. Without that, I don't believe in myself. And that's what a lot, I think, happens in West Cumbria. And that's paternalism that we're not talking about so much. And it's something that I'm interested in talking about more. So I decided to do this film, brought people in, but what it meant is I was holding a lot of space. It's interesting, Maddie was just saying earlier about when they have residencies, about having that kind of wraparound package. So I ended up with a bunch of creatives, some of who knew the county, some of who didn't. I was having to explain this deeply personal narrative, and a lot of it was re-traumatizing, because I was going back to these places 20 years later from after some of the events had occurred, and I was like, bloody hell, that was tough. So I suddenly realized I'd done something really complicated, and there's people in the audience that have worked with me before in West Cumbria. This is not the first time I've done this. My work is complicated because it's about those complicated matters, and I will put myself in the eye of the storm. I do all the time, and I think, and that's a challenge of working as a creative, as a freelance. You're by yourself a lot, and then you present it to an audience, and you're still by yourself on the stage. And it's this really strange feeling of being both an insider and an outsider, someone who belongs, someone who doesn't belong, and everyone who works in those fields, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So I did quite a lot of work just driving around West Cumbria and showing people things and telling the stories. There's so much story in the landscape. So I was explaining about stories. I'm going to show you a piece where we filmed down at Fleswick, which was something I really wanted to film. If anyone's familiar with Fleswick Bay, there's a really interesting piece of cliff there that I was really knew that was part of it. And I did some voice recording as well, because I wanted to listen to myself back, like where my kind of accent was picking up. So I've got a voice recording that's of me. I've got a little bit of film to show you. And then I ended up, it got kind of more complex, because I ended up with this film that was like 45 minutes long. And I looked at the first cuts and I looked back at it. It wasn't landing with me at all. And I was like, it doesn't even look like my West Cumbria, because the person who filmed it wasn't from Cumbria. And they were seeing Cumbria very differently from the way I was seeing it. So I was watching it. And at first I was thinking, it's just because I'm watching myself on screen. I'm not used to seeing myself, and it's just making me feel uncomfortable. But it wasn't, and I knew in my heart of hearts, I knew this thing wasn't right. And then I was terrified, because I was like, oh my God, they've given me this money, and I know this isn't right. And I didn't know what to do, and I had this awful moment where I was like, I shouldn't have applied for it. I've made a terrible day, and I kind of went down that rabbit hole. And then I worked with a mentor, and I showed him, and he said, what you're picking up on it is right. There are some things in this that aren't working. And that was kind of validation, because I was like, okay, I took a massive risk. I did a different art form. So what me and him have done, we've looked at that footage again, and we've started to make a slightly different film. That's a film out of a film. So I'm going to end up with this 45-minute piece that I'll show you some bits of it, but I'm not sure. It might remain like this mysterious thing that people call looking for in West Cumbria, buried under the sand, and it might get dead famous because nobody's seen it. I could do that. And then there's this other kind of 10-minute film that I'll explain a bit more about as well. But also, more interestingly, I've been speaking with Phil from Coldew Press, and we're going to publish the piece. It's quite a long piece, So the actual kind of product at the end of the residency, like I say, it's not a poem, but it's full of poetry. It's not a script, but it's written as script. So there will be this thing. I'm also going to hopefully work with Florence Mine. I saw Sue over there. I'm going to work with Florence Mine, which I've got a big relationship with because I helped that set the place up as an art centre back in the day. So I've got a big relationship with that. And I'm hoping that we'll have both of these films in different bits. But what I also want to do, because as a writer, I can get very stuck as a person actually, I can get very stuck inside my own head. I'm going to print the script on like massive bits, and I'm going to use that as part of an exhibition so people can come in and actually be kind of almost inside a script, seeing these bits of film. Maybe I'll do some performance as a launch, and then take the script away and kind of read it, and then hopefully come back as like knowing the story, and then come back and be back inside of it. So that's kind of my plan. Should we listen to that voice recording? Just before we play it, I just wanted to acknowledge Florence. Is Gilbert still around? So Gilbert is about 942 years old. And Gilbert is like, he knows everything about Florence Mine. He's a geologist, he's like an engineer, he's just incredible, right? One of the words that I use in this piece of writing that you're going to hear now was a word that he told me when I was working there. Obviously, West Cumbria is a mining town, right? It's built on mines, it's iron ore and it's coal. In male mining terms, when there is nothing left to take from the earth, the technical term that they write down is that the earth has been raped. There is nothing left. That's the psychology I grew up in, yeah? That's the landscape I grew up in. And I just want you to hold that as a thought. This is that first piece.
Senior 28, Whitehaven, West Cumbria, a town once full of itself, once filled with its own promise, once the fourth biggest port after London, Liverpool and Bristol, a town that shipped in rum and shipped out its soul, its core, sold its very foundations. It's not without its heroes, its myths, its fables, its legends. John Paul Jones, George Washington's grandmother, and the man who wrote Cher's last #1. Do you believe in love? And maybe it could have been something, but they said the harbour lacked depth, so the bigger boats would never have been able to dock, and it was so far away with no real roads in or real roads out. When the land was robbed, or raped, as they say, in the dialect of work, language of men, robbed of its coal, raped of its soul, it grew so barren hard it fossilised, became nuclear. The hearts and the veins and the wallets of the town pumped with the pounded weight of plutonium, fast cars, fancy holidays that lived cheek by goated jowl with the hole-stitched pockets of children of the illiterate, fate falling on them slowly, like the blue-grey curl of second-hand cigarette smoke in dusty living rooms, smelling of twice-fried food, flat-screen, hollow-eyed drug transfers, petty crime and depression. A town where suicide winked a silver lining to shine by a cheek and a light to look like an answer.
So that's part of the recording. That last part about suicide, I didn't want to shy away from that. West Cumbria's got one of the highest suicide rates in the country. There's a great organisation, Every Life Matters, that are doing loads of work around the county, which is really important. Shortly before I got awarded the Catalyst residency, one of my good friends, her brother committed suicide. He's 26. Again, this we're talking about West Cumbria. It's a very different place from the Lake District. It's not the Lake District. And I wanted to look at some of those issues in the work. One of my first jobs was working for the Whitehaven News when I was like 18. And one of my first stories was a woman who's committed suicide from a multi-story car park. So this isn't an easy piece. There's tough stuff in it. And that's something that I didn't want to shy away from that. I wanted to, like I said, I put myself in the eye of the storm in many ways. I'm going to show you a wee bit of a film part. I might stop it and start it. I might go forwards. It's very. Does anyone know what the Bechdel test is for film? Yeah. So the Bechdel test. The Bechdel test, right, says that in order to pass the Bechdel test, it's Alison Bechdel, who was she's a graphic artist. It has to have on screen at any one time 2 women who talk to each other about a subject other than a man. Now, you will be surprised at how many films don't pass the Bechdel test. I invite you to go home this evening, watch some scenes from your favourite film, and see if it can pass the Bechdel test. All right? So that was. I also was like, it's got to pass this bloody test as well, right? Fortunately, it does, because we had a mostly female crew and female actors. Some who were from Cumbria, some who weren't. This is Fleswick. Does anyone know these cliffs? So this is Fleswick. There's precious stones on this beach, and there's loads of myths around this. Apparently, the monks that went to St. Bees and formed St. Bees, this is where they would have come in at on Fleswick Bay, and it's an amazing. You can only get there by foot. And we did some drone footage. At one point, we went out on a boat, which was another part of my obsessive thing of wanting to do. But that footage was awful because it was just like this the whole time. But we had a really good time with the guy who took us out on the boat and explained all the stuff about the cormorants and the puffins and all the different. It's RSPB reserve as well. But yeah, Fleswick Bay. I'm going to stop telling people about it because I don't want them to go, because I really, really like it, and it's amazing when you're there by yourself. So there's going to be a wee bit of me just opening it, and then I'll ask Tom just to like fast forward through like bits and bobs. And this was the film that I made. Some people I've showed them it. People are like, well, it's all right, so it's all right, and I'm like, but something's not right, and I don't know what it is, and I'm just having to go with that process of like trying to make something. And I need to be dead honest with myself, because I can't do anything else. So this is art.
Once there was a girl, found herself lost, fresh out of university, an arts graduate, no direction, no career, no path. She returned home with a rucksack, 7 badly packed boxes of junk kitchen utensils and bric-a-brac. There was, of course, a certificate to show she read Keats, Auden, Shakespeare, and Eliot, plus the self-lengthening shadow of a student loan. She returned to the land of her birth, her youth, the edge of the Western Lake District, smack bang in the centre of four-walled post-industrial decline, where she searched the hills for answers. The sea battles the cliffs with questions, year after year, wave to wave, until the sheep fall, the cliff falls. The questions and answers fight and yearn in the wash of the waves, the tug of the tides, the to and fro in shapes the sandstone slabs on the beach. Slabs that were once the upright, sun-facing cliff edges themselves. Were all just sand and seawater, lakes and low skies, laced with the diamond dust of coal. It was a town built on coal, with coal, not coal, colder. Cheek like the sea. That's for how. Usually go up to time up. Yeah. That's for how. You dirty bitch! You're like that? Yeah. I hope by now it's not doing that at all. Now I listen for my thing.
2 a.m. girls like with screaming, the point of heels, click, click, click. There was scraping sounds, followed the spinning lost, and ankle going over. The other heel claps, the hand goes out, steadies itself, and goes on. No, it didn't go back, so you have to go out. Come on, man. I mean, you'll have to get to church. You can't go just like that. You'll never go walking like that. I've got to spread, alright? But don't put on that old army check for saving up about him. Sometimes you just come back from here before. Yeah, after that. You don't even have to get changed. You can wear that army jacket and I'll just pretend I'm your carer and you've got that PTSD. What's it? You been a wax soldier? What do you need? What do I have? Oh, no, even I don't think only what back to that.
So that was the woman in the red. Yeah, so the woman in the red, she's not a professional actor. She's a woman I worked with from Cleatamua, who just understood the story really well. And she basically was the character that I'd written. So she was absolutely great for working with. And then Erin is an actor from not West Cumbria. She's from further up towards Carlisle. And Erin is trained as an actor, so we kind of all worked together. And we you know, there is this 45-minute stuff that people seem to quite like, but there's something about me that's not landing. So what I did was something slightly different. So if you put the next one, I'm going to play 5 minutes of this next one, and then I might stop talking. All right.
Blessed because one of the American movies get job with a shop, God knows which, factory. Put then all my book. That's what bears about doing. There was no art stuff, institution, talent spotted. Step backwards and backwards beyond, sideways. Walk through to find a community, get noticed. It's hard not wanting to be here. Loading the hills and the lakes that surround it, wandering through the streets, in the dark, to the street, and become a pattern of change. Yeah. The blessing of the past, I want to say, never would be easier. Get a job in a shop, factory, street, the butcher, the baker, the nuclear home hard worker.
felony. That's what the picture on here. There was no basic against and no art, no talent spotters. What is he supposed to do if I know him? What is he supposed to do if I community? Then noted. Is he supposed to live in his town? No one leaves the girls and the left surrounded the wandering the streets at night because sleep has become a bad pattern of dreams. That's usual.
No, sorry, man. I started to lean into the fact that I was doing things on repeat. And I was like, hang on a minute, this is what my life looks like. This is what's happening. OCD, there's lots of research going on at the moment that suggests it's actually part of a neurodiversity. And I'm like, okay, this is starting to make a lot of sense. This is what's happening. So I kind of started embodying the film. I was like, I'm making this film, I've been making for this many years. I keep going around the same thing. I'm still in it, I'm still doing it. And then when I spoke with Chris, who was my mentor, he was like, lean into that. Go into what's actually happening. So we started making this. And this idea that plutonium has a half-life of 24,000 years. But a thought doesn't have any half-life, so you're just stuck with the bastard forever. And you're like, what? So yeah, it's kind of an interesting journey that I'm on. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to make my whole project. I don't want to pathologize or make it into something that's about that. What I want is there's going to be this published piece. There's going to be something that people can take away. And I want it to be whatever it is for people who read it. At the end of the day, once you make a bit of work, it's not yours anymore. It goes out into the world and it has a life of its own. So that's kind of, I want to release it. It's like, I think, like, go on, off you go, so I don't have to think about this anymore.
Fantastic. Yeah, let's release it. Thank you. Right, I think a round of applause. So as we're slightly short of time, we're going to go straight into some questions from the floor. So does anybody would like to ask Emma anything? Yeah. Here we go.
Hiya. In my other role, I work as a mental health therapist with children and young people, and I just wanted to ask a bit about how important you think the arts are to kind of help people with their mental health. I know that's a very big question. But
There's a really good podcast that the Wellcome Trust just put together looking at exactly that, and getting people to engage in arts projects, and they were measuring their cortisol level. And within 20 minutes of engaging in an arts-based activity, there was measurable differences in cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone, so high cortisol suggests a high stress and a state of unrest. So yeah, it is important. I think what's really important is community. Like, I think in the West, we've focused way too much on the individual and forgotten that, like, you know, to raise a child, we need a village. To heal a person, we need community. Like, and this is an isolated area. So yeah, I think arts in the context of community, yeah, but if you're just giving someone a set of watercolours and say, go home, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Chap over there. Can we hand that microphone along, please? That would be great. Thanks.
Thanks, Emma. I mean, I think your work's raw and beautiful and brilliant and great. I love it. And I'm from West Cumbria as well. I realise that for a lot of people in West Cumbria, the normal response is to get as far away from the place as possible, and not to speak about the things that you speak about. So I'm really interested. How does speaking the unspeakable about West Cumbria change your relationship to it?
Wow. Does it change my relationship to it? I mean, I've ricocheted back and forwards from West Cumbria since I was 17, 18. I've lived in, that's been part of my process of not being able to find like where to be. So I keep coming back to this place. And I can't remember, there's a quote by someone that talks about, it's like when you go on a journey, it's to come back to the place where you begun and see it with new eyes. And I can't remember, it's a philosopher, and I'm kind of paraphrasing it. And it's not the place that's changed, it's you as being part of the journey. Cumbria is changing, like there's no doubt about it, it's changing. My niece and nephew are 14, they're having a different experience to what I had. I'm one of those weird millennials who grew up both pre-internet and then internet. I'm like one of that weird generation. That friend of mine, Guy's put his name out, he's made a brilliant film about this cohort of people. So my relationship to it, sometimes I really like it. So I remember like when I was getting interviewed by the Catalyst team, I kept talking about that cliff and how much I wanted to film that cliff. And I was like, I'm going to film this cliff. And I'm like, how they gave me the residency, how I talked about a cliff for 20 minutes, I have no idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a boat and I'm going to film this cliff and it's going to be great. And I kind of, approaching the land from the sea is a very different experience. And that was kind of a little bit of a transformative experience there, because very few people approach West Cumbria from the sea. And it's like really quite striking, So I've always had this kind of, difficult relationship with the place, but talking about the things I'm talking about, I think it's with anything, when you talk about difficult things, it gives people permission to talk about difficult things. So it's about opening up those spaces. And if that's something I can be part of, great. And I'm also learning kind of where the boundaries are for my own vulnerabilities as well, and how much I could. I've done a lot of community artwork over the last 20 years, so I've worked with different populations, and I've worked with quite traumatized populations as well. So talking about these things, I don't know if it directly affects my relationship with the landscape or with West Cumbria in general, but I'm definitely pleased to be part of the discourse, because I think it's really important that we open up the things that we're talking about in events like this. That we're here having that conversation, and that's really important. That we just keep talking about things and seeing what can happen.
Excellent. So, anyone else? Last question.
Just because the mic's here,
Thanks.
that's okay. Thanks so much, Emma, for sharing, especially when it's such personal topics in a room of strangers, so appreciated. I think you highlighted something that we are all here for today in the challenges of being a freelance artist, and that moment where, okay, I had this idea, I've gone through this process, I'm not happy with the output that it's reached or that it's going to reach. And, with organisations that are funded for 2-3 year projects, they're able to say, well, actually, that was research and development, and we know the changes that we can make. But if you have like a finite amount of time and other people's resources and limited resources yourself, how do you make those difficult decisions? And how did the Catalyst team help you with those?
So I was very fortunate that they were very open to discussion, and that was really good for me. And I was able to say, listen, I've got this thing and I'm not sure. I think it's great that Maddie's on as an artist as well, was there. So it wasn't like I was just speaking to people who hadn't experienced like what it's like to be in process and R&D and all that kind of stuff. I think people grossly underestimate the time that it takes to make work. It's such a long process, and like you say, you do something, you scrumple it up, you go back to the drawing board, the work starts dictating the direction it's going in anyways. So yeah, I think like Jack, sorry, but he said he'd changed his pace of working, even in being in West Cumbria. So the team were great, and I felt very supported by the team, and that was, I think, just a really nice part of this project, that they were there, like at the end of an email or whatever. So that was something that, but it was more me. It was more like me waking up in the middle of the night thinking, oh my God, how am I going to give them £25,000 back? You know, like when I've spent it on these other artists, what do I do? And I think that, again, that's partly, you know, that internal critic that you have as an artist, and that everyone has as a person as well, that feeds into mental health stuff. Like, we're generally our own worst enemies, and when you actually just reach out and go, listen, this is what's going on, often the response you get is, all right, okay, well what do we do next? Let's look at what happens next. Yeah, so it's just that kind of getting out of that fear-based mode of, and also this kind of idea of like, sometimes I was confused. I was like, is this a commission where I make something at the end? Or is this a residency where I'm exploring things? And there was all this kind of up and down moments. And then talking with the University of Cumbria, the person who was working there at the time, they were saying to me, well, think of it as proof of concept. And I was like, yeah, right, yeah. That's Google proof of concept. Right. So it's all right, then, yeah, I'll do that. So it was kind of like that. That's what my process has been like. So yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fantastic. This one? Up there. Very loud there. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Emma. And I think genuinely Emma has gone on the most epic journey, and I think it says a lot of us as freelancers, how when you get given that gift of a residency, how you struggle with it and recreate it and recreate it. And there is something quite amazing about everyone in this room, because we are so committed to what we do and what we deliver. So that to me is always gratifying. But I think Emma has done some amazing work, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it at Florence Mine some point in the future. So again, look out for details on Cumbria Arts and Culture Network.